It is now my special pleasure to introduce Bishop Ralph T. Alton of the United Methodist Church. There are a number of reasons to have him with us today. First, but not least, he is a graduate of Ohio Wesleyan University and a classmate of my mother's at that great school, of which I also have the honor of being an alumnus. Second, he has been a valued member of the DePauw's Board of Trustees from 1972 to 1980, and of enormous help to all of us in keeping DePauw a great institution. Now I would like to publicly announce that the Board of Trustees voted Ralph Alton a life member at its April meeting. Congratulations. Third, Bishop Alton only has a few months left in Indiana before he and his lovely wife Marion retire to Madison, Wisconsin, where he served as bishop from 1960 to 1972, or until coming to Indiana. Fourth, and perhaps most important, Bishop Alton is about as close to a pope as we Methodists can have. Last year, his 60 active colleagues in the worldwide United Methodist Council of Bishops elected him as their president for 1979 to 1980, and he just finished presiding over the General Conference of the Worldwide Church, which met in Indianapolis last month. I present to you at this time a good friend of DePauw and one of the truly great leaders of America, Ralph T. Alton, who will speak to us on hopeful assumptions.
Dr. Rosser, distinguished members of the Platform Party, members of the faculty, parents, friends, anyone else who's here, in addition to especially the 1980 class, and particularly you, because this address is specifically to you, and to anybody else that happens to want to listen in. And anybody who doesn't want to listen in, will you please not disturb those who might. Secondly, I want to assure you that I've learned from long experience that commencement addresses are remembered in inverse proportion to their length. And I shall govern myself accordingly. A year ago now, Robert Rankin, Vice President of the Danforth Foundation, which has a long and illustrious relationship with higher education, asked a number of professors at universities across the United States to size up in a paragraph the graduating class of 1979 at their respective schools. In November last year, he addressed a meeting in Indianapolis where I was present, in which he quoted from some of those statements, and I borrow from his address. A Stanford professor of history wrote, "The class of '79 does not know who it is or where it's going. It does not know how it relates to the past or to the future, and so has little sense of the present. They are running, fasting, and meditating their way to the enabling vision which for the present is absent, and in its absence is a sense of perilous stagnation." A professor at the University of Massachusetts wrote, "There is no longer a single way to characterize the class of '79. This year's graduates present a bewildering potpourri of political, religious, ethnic, and social commitment. These students are expressing more poignantly and pointedly than in previous years certain concerns which can be called moral or even religious. Ambivalence is the term that best captures their states of mind." Finally, another professor of a Catholic college wrote, "Unlike the hateful class of '69, which was lovable, this one is likable. The seniors are so concerned about getting on the boat that they haven't got the chutzpah to rock it. Their personal amiability derives in equal parts from social apathy and economic anxiety. It may be somewhat less fashionable, however, to point out that some of their apathy is probably due to the growing discouragement of their middle-aged professors, including myself, regarding the present possibilities of social and political reform. I'm sure that the potentialities of student commitment are still there. End of quote. Now, I do not know this graduating class of 1980 at DePauw well enough to attempt such an analytical paragraph. I would be very interested in what the members of the faculty here would do with that kind of an assignment. But on the basis of my rather extensive relationship with church-related higher education in general, and my acquaintance with DePauw during the last 8 years as an interested observer of many of the activities that constitute the total education experience here, I would like to venture some hopeful assumptions concerning what the 4 years, more or less, that you have spent here have deposited in your characters that might represent attitudes with which you leave here to share in the life of the world. First, I would hope that you are committed to personal integrity, that you do know who you are, and that you've established a core of personal identity to which you are determined to be true. The old familiar Shakespearean quote says, "To thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man." That ought to mean the establishment of standards of life by which you're determined to live, not in response to external compulsions, but as an expression of internal purpose. It's a sad commentary on the moral decadence of our society that in many spheres of behavior, the primary rule by which life seems to be lived is what is sometimes referred to as the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught. Anything is right that you can get away with, whether that's a matter of the speed with which you drive when there's no police car in sight, or the way you fulfill your obligations, both to the work you have to do and to interpersonal relationships. There was once a day when the expression, "his word is his bond," was a commonly accepted standard for verbal contracts of one kind or another. Now we are warned that we'd better look carefully at the fine print. And this reveals an increasing absence of the kind of personal integrity that provides both a sense of personal well-being and a security for society. The people's poet Edgar Guest once expressed his own creed in this regard by writing, "To be without pretense or sham exactly what men think I am. To be the same when I'm alone as when my every deed is known. To have no secret place wherein I stoop unseen to shame or sin." All the way from a lack of pride in workmanship to a willingness to sell one's influence, there's a tragic lack of integrity in the lives of many people, and you ought not be among them. In the second place, I would hope that your educational experience has led you to accept a sense of social responsibility. The stability of any society depends on it containing enough people who are willing to contribute to that society more than they get out of it, to make up for the people who get more out of it than they contribute. That's true of families and institutions like universities and nations and the world of nations. The price of privilege is always responsibility. Jesus once put it this way, "Everyone to whom much is given, of him will be much required." To be an educated person means having the responsibility of contributing to the well-being of the total society in terms of understanding and skill in attaining a fuller life for everyone. That runs directly counter to a prevailing notion that education ought to guarantee greater returns for less effort. At the root of many of the problems of our society is a spirit of self-interest expressed in both personal and group terms, seeking to get as much as I can for myself and my kind, however I identify that grouping, at whatever cost to the total society. Unless you become a part of a movement in society to reverse that spirit and to develop a willingness to accept social responsibility that understands that there's no real security for anyone, politically, socially, economically, until there's security for everyone, the future of the life of our nation and our world is foreboding. Activities in which many of you have participated as part of this student body that have offered volunteer assistance to people in conditions of need are a prototype of the kind of service to society that I hopefully assume has become a part of the character of this class. And I would add that the record that you've set by your volunteering contributions to the support of continuing education here in this place is another indication of your movement in that direction. Now let me try another one on you to see how it fits. I would hope that your experience at DePauw has created in you a thirst for learning that's not yet satisfied. Of course, formal education requires the establishment of more or less arbitrary standards for the measurement of achievement. You will receive diplomas today that will certify that you have successfully demonstrated your learning achievement in terms of the required number of semester hours with passing grades to satisfy the standards established by DePauw for what is called graduation. And incidentally, have paid all your bills. But the diploma cannot indicate the extent to which your experience here has quickened in you an awareness of the availability of knowledge which still awaits your research. There has stuck in my mind a comment a certain person made once, at least half facetiously I hope, that he had graduated from college in a certain year and hadn't cracked a book since. Certainly all learning is not from books, but how much better the familiar sage comment, the more I know I don't know, and one might add, and am impatient to learn. Some of you will be going on to further formal education in some chosen discipline, but no specialized discipline is adequate to contain all knowledge necessary for living that is either thoroughly meaningful or completely satisfying. The world is full of people who are technically skilled in particular capabilities, who've never learned how to surround their capabilities with values that give them meaningful purpose or even satisfying opportunities. One of my most memorable professors from my own university experience said to us one day toward the end of his course, "I don't care if you forget everything you've learned in this class if you just remember how you learned it, and continue to use that skill in further learning." Now, I'm sure he didn't mean that 100%, because I'm sure he hoped we would remember some things we'd learned, but his point was well taken. And I dare say that every professor here at DePauw would endorse that wish. Actually, the real significance of what you've learned here will be as greatly determined by what you learn after you leave here as by your present level of knowledge. So I hope this occasion is only a milestone in a long road ahead of you over which you will travel in pursuit of learning that will increasingly add new dimensions to your understanding of and your equipment for satisfying living. And finally, and you can fasten your seatbelts now for the approach to conclusion, I hope you're aware that purpose and motivation are really more important to the use of learning than information or skill. More important than answers to questions about what, where, how, and when is the answer to the question why. Knowledge is a valuable tool, but what you do with it will depend on your motivation. Education does not have the capability of determining its own motivation. Education has been made to serve the purposes of whatever motivations have controlled it. Too often we've discovered that history has been written from the perspective of the claim to superiority of those who wrote its texts. Science has been captive to serving the purposes of the society within which it operates. The literature created by a culture often mirrors the prejudices and blindness of its origin far more frequently than it reflects a glimpse into absolute truth. It should be the particular lot of truly learned people to prophetically hold all knowledge under the revealing light of inquiry into motivation, and that consequently insists on the discovery of purposes that can give the highest possible meanings to knowledge. Only so does learning become wisdom. So I deposit my hopeful assumptions with you, the class of 1980 at DePauw University. It may be that you will prove my assumptions valid.